Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 17 with Tino and Aaron. Aaron, you're back. Welcome back, homie.
Thank you. Good to be back.
It's good to have you back, man. Super excited. Week one is under our belts or done. We're going to talk about our first impressions with week one, some surprise hitters and pitchers, our waiver musings, which is going to be a weekly segment, I think, moving forward. How's it been? How you feeling about week one?
It's interesting that I feel like the league has been really compelling so far. I jotted down some notes for each division, but it's been good. I haven't been able to watch a ton of games. Sunday, I got off work. I was able to watch a lot of Hunter Green start, which has kind of been the highlight of my what I've been able to view in live so far. But I also had 3 other games up. I was able to watch a couple hours. But just listening to a lot of games, obviously following along MLB at bat each night, following my players, and it's been good. Just a lot of things league wide. I think rookies struggling, a lot of bullpen volatility, and then a couple of surprise teams that I think it's been interesting to see them start well.
Awesome. So Matt and Freddie came out to Walla Walla, and we rented an Airbnb. Well, Matt rented an Airbnb, and we spent the first opening day weekend just watching baseball, and that was quite amazing. That's going to be a tradition for all of us to get together, I think, moving forward. I agree. There's been a lot of really fun surprises. I think the first one that comes to mind is Stephen Kwan. We can address that in a little bit. Any coffee stories? Anything that's happened with coffee for you in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, what I wanted to share for me was I recently bought some glassware with the intention of doing some cupping here at home. Part of my journey in coffee, I worked in coffee quality for a while, and cupped every day at quite a volume. Went through some pretty rigorous training to be able to do that for my job. Was hoping to be able to do some of that in my current role, and that really hasn't come to fruition. So I really want to take some more ownership and do some more cupping at home. Mm-hmm. So that was just a step in that process. For me, it's not a recreational way to brew. It's a way to really evaluate coffee. But there's some skills that I've learned, and it's a different experience coffee. So that's something that I want to carve out time and make a priority to continue to do, keep my skills up, continue to look at coffee that way. And so just getting the equipment is obviously the first start. I have a little air roaster that I used during the pandemic to actually cup coffee for Starbucks, and I was able to keep that equipment through the grace of my previous supervisor. But so anyway, I got the equipment now, and now I just got to get some green coffee, and I look forward to doing that, and maybe in future pods if I'm able to maybe share some things I've been cupping.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's at some point I would love to start roasting again. I did do some roasting in Seattle before moving out here. A friend of mine had a roaster that she bought from Japan that was pretty cool. We bought some coffee from Atlas, and we would roast some coffee each week, and that's awesome. I'd love to actually, if you cupped during the pod, that would be super cool just to see, because cupping there's so many steps that go to cupping to really understand what it is that you're tasting. And I think that the person or the layman person who's never really cupped before doesn't realize that there's a whole bunch of steps and there's a protocol to be able to understand what it is that you're drinking. My coffee story. So I went to the roastery, and they were pushing this El Salvador honey processed coffee on me. And I always think so for those who haven't had honey processed coffee before, honey process is somewhere between natural and washed, right? So natural coffee is you basically leave the bean with everything on it before setting it out to dry. And all the sugars and all the things that are surrounding the bean will impact the way in which it dries in the sun. And naturally processed coffee tends to be really intense, really fermented. For someone who has had a lot of natural processed coffee, you can taste it immediately. You know you're drinking a naturally processed bean. Honey process is somewhere in the middle where they're removing, well, you can probably explain it better than me. They're removing a portion of the original kind of what is there. You explain it better than me. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So typically when coffee is processed, when we say we're processed, we're just the coffee bean is inside of fruit. Think of it as a cherry, and then the coffee bean's like the pit. So we talk about processing, you're just like, how do you take the fruit off? How do you get down to the bean? How do you get down to the pit or the bean? And so the honey process is a partial removal. You're just taking the outer skin off and leaving what's called the mucilage. It's kind of a sticky layer, the kind of the pulpy layer that's in between the bean and the skin. Whereas a traditional process, they would take, we'd wash that off using mostly water all the way down to the bean in one step.
Right. So this El Salvador, I bought it because for me, it's like wine. Anything that is interesting or different or something that I typically don't have, like I want to try it. So I bought the El Salvador, brewed it today, typical process, like 44 grams, measured it out in a baratza, ground at 18, 8 cups of water, brewed it, and it was phenomenal. I don't, typically I'm not a big like honey process, natural process person. And I certainly don't buy into the honey process marketing, which is, I think, a lot of why they call it that. It's the attempt to get people to buy something and expect it to be sweeter. But this El Salvador was phenomenal. It was sweet. It was really calming on the palate. Like it was just a really pleasant, beautiful cup of coffee. And I have to say, I was thoroughly impressed. And I can't say that I've ever said that about a Walla Walla Roastery cup of coffee. But I was really, really happy. And the way that I am, if I have a great cup of coffee in the morning, the rest of my day is great. Like anything can happen and I'm solid. I'm super happy. So I had this really great, amazing cup of coffee this morning I'm Walla Walla Roastery. If you ever listen to our pod, thank you. You guys did an amazing job. I'm super appreciative. I'm not as skeptical of the honey process as I once was because you delivered me a really beautiful cup of coffee this morning.
That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It sounds really good. And
it was great.
I think what's not commonly known about coffee, because we only see it as inform, is it's one of the more chemically complex things that we consume. And so these variables in processing, leaving these different parts of the fruit, whether it's all the fruit, as you described, in natural or partial in honey, how long it's dried, how much moisture, it all really affects the chemical composition of the coffee and and then you go and roast it, and that's another completely different process change. So there's just a lot of elements and a lot of triggers that you can pull on coffee. And I agree, it is easy to dismiss something like honey, like as a marketing tag or name. But if it is done well, I think there is an opportunity to present different flavors. I mean, it's because there is an amount of, again, there's sugars and compounds that are left on the bean, and that affects what the bean then carries forward when you put it in a roaster. So
100%. And to your point about cupping, like for me, I don't do formal cuppings, but I certainly, so I drink my coffee black. I don't add anything to it. And for me, I want to consume it like the layman would consume it, right? And this El Salvador honey it was beautiful. It was, if I cupped it, I would have said, let's go sell it. Let's roast it like that, do it like that. Like, this is amazing. Let's go.
Yeah.
To your point about glassware or mugs, I have to say, so latte art is something we can talk about in another podcast, but basically it's a way to present coffee to the customer, the consumer, and to increase their expectation, right? And I found that picking the right mugs or the right glassware or the right serveware is so influential in the ability to perform latte art or to present like a beautiful cup of coffee. And so we can address this at another time, but when I moved to Chicago, I ordered a whole bunch of mugs from Revolutions and like built the most beautiful latte art you've ever seen. The coffee was really, really great, but I think that there's something, how do I say it? There's something about ordering the right serveware that presents coffee in a way that's more marketable, but also it tastes better if it looks beautiful. And it's something it's something we don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
So you and I can continue this conversation later.
Yeah.
But it's something that was a little bit taboo to talk about with Starbucks. And I think is something that is worth discussing later on.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we move on to baseball, I mean, to me, I think we've talked about two things: presentation or craft, and also processing. And I think, to me, I always saw art and as a form of engagement, as a way to, there's a theater aspect, as a way to create an experience for that person who
100%.
took the time to come in to the store. Then maybe elevate their experience or have a connection with them.
Right.
Whereas the processing is a way to connect people to the people that grew the coffee. It's a way to storytell, because again, we only see the coffee in its end form, and there's so many people whose livelihoods are connected to that product, and it's a way to kind of like honor them and kind of can help people make that connection that there's more than what's just in front of you.
Right.
And I think that's the thing I appreciate about those unique things. Obviously, it shows up in the cup. And there's those of us who really appreciate that, but I think it's also just a way to like connect people to the people who actually grew the coffee, and the fact that it came from somewhere else around the world,
Right.
and came a really long way to actually be enjoyed or consumed by you. So
Right.
I think that's something that can be overlooked.
I couldn't agree more. There's
Baseball.
a right. Yes, baseball. Well, real quick, there's
Yeah.
a face to every step along the way to present you with a cup of coffee, I think is the point, right?
Yeah.
And there's a story to every face, and it's important to remember. But yes, baseball. So, who surprised you first week? What player do you have on your
real
list?
quick overall impressions. I think the rookie hitters struggling for the most part. Speaking for a player that I roster, like Spencer Torkelson, he was 0 for his first 8, was like 2 walks and 6 strikeouts. Subsequently, he's had a few hits, but by and large, the rookies, the prospects that we got really excited about in the fantasy community have struggled. And it's just a reminder that baseball is really hard. However, being a pitching, someone who loves pitching, I wanted to highlight like Hunter Green and Matt Brash were 2 rookies who showed up on the stage, and the moment wasn't too big for them, and he really performed quite well. Right. And from a skills perspective, that's something that you and I try to highlight. They both were in the top 5 on Eno's first stuff plus rankings. So I thought was not only
Matt Brash was number 1.
Yeah, he was number 1. He got passed recently, but he's still in the top 5. But anyway, yeah, just to see those 2 young guys again the moment wasn't too big for them, and their stuff really played amidst all the hitters struggling. And it's no shade towards the hitters. I wanted to highlight those young pitchers who really did well, because I think it's in contrast with the hitters who were struggling so much,
Right.
which is understandable. That was really neat. And again, the bullpen volatility. I mean, I wrote down, you had trades on opening day. San Diego, Miami, Minnesota, Baltimore completely shook up their bullpens on opening day, and what that meant for those of us in fantasy. And then you got teams like Texas who just can't get anyone out in the bullpen. No, I mean, they've blown so many so many leads so far. Hendricks, Presley, Chapman, all dealing with reduced velocities, control issues,
Right.
Complete chaos and confusion with the Giants, the Reds, the Red Sox, the Marlins. It's just, again, in fantasy, it's been such a challenge to navigate these things early on.
Right.
So I don't know if you have reaction to any of that for the bullpen or the rookies before we talk about surprising players.
Well, so I have to defend Julio because
I wasn't coming after Julio. Come on.
no, I know. No, but you were talking about rookies in general. And I think Julio,
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know what it is, but so Julio's had at least 4 called strike threes that have been clearly outside of the zone. And not like 1 inch outside of the zone, but like 3, 4, 5, 6 inches outside of the zone. And I don't think that the umps have something against rookies.
Mhm.
I think the umps are actually expanding the zone in general. And that's what I've seen. But Julio, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about one bit. Like, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to have to adjust his zone. He's going to have to start swinging at more pitches. But he's the kind of bat and has the kind of hit tool that once he adjusts, I think he's going to be fine. Bullpens, I think, are really, really interesting. Like, is Emilio Pagan going to become like a 35 save closer? I really think that
If you're
that's
asking me, I'm going to say no.
So who gets the saves there? Who gets the save?
I think it's split around.
Between Pagan and who?
Pagan, Duffy, Duran, Alcala when he's healthy. I mean, Alcala has yet to be healthy this year. He was the best pitcher by skills last year. He had a finger issue, which affected his buildup in training. And then so his velocity was down. And then because of that, his elbow started breaking. So maybe this year is going to be a wash for him. But they trust Duffy. Duran is coming on like a freight train.
So let's talk about Duran for a minute. I know you
Sure.
you roster him in our home league.
I do.
And he's classified as a starting pitcher, not a relief pitcher.
Because he was a starter in minors, yes.
His stuff is phenomenal. So for those who don't know, Johan, how do you pronounce his first name?
My understanding is it's Johan Duran.
Okay.
Not Duran, it's Duran. And
so
it's
he
Johan.
throws 101 miles an hour. And his splitter is basically 94, 95, like right in that range. He's clearly the relief pitcher with the best stuff, but I don't know that he's going to actually close this year and even next year. How do you value him, given the fact that you can place him in a starting pitcher role in our league and accumulate probably 60 innings, 80 strikeouts, maybe some holds, maybe a couple saves. I'm not trying to call you on the carpet and try to understand how you value him, because for my own purposes.
Sure.
But I do think that it's a conversation worth having, where you have this pitcher that everybody's talking about who has amazing stuff, and we don't really know where to place him. We don't know how to value him in general.
Yeah. Well, I think he's a good example of like these kind of tumultuous bullpens. I don't think I said that right. Tumultuous
bullpens. Yes.
Where it's the skills in fantasy. Sometimes we want to see the skills align with the opportunity and the role, right. And it's just not that simple. I think from a skills perspective, because of his history as a starter, he has potential to maybe throw more multi-inning outings. His stuff is off the charts. And I think one of the things I appreciate about the setup in Fantrax is we have opportunity not only for saves, but also holds and wins or categories. So for me, you asked me how I value him in Fantrax specifically. Obviously, in a saves only league, Duran, pardon me, is his value is capped by his opportunity in the ninth. Maybe there may be days where he gets that opportunity. And following the writer on the Athletic for the Twins, whose name is escaping me, he's a really good writer. But anyway, I'm following him closely. The team is grooming him to kind of get him exposure to the ninth inning, but he's not going to be William Hendricks. He's not going to just sit in the bullpen until the ninth. There are going to be times where they use him, other times, but they're also trying to be the fact that this is his first extended look in the majors. They're not going to just throw him in the ninth either. I want to make sure he's ready for that. But I value him as someone who can get on a per inning basis. The skills are extremely high and could contribute across potentially 3 categories, right? Because he can pitch in the middle of the game where he can get me a win or a hold. And if he gets that ninth opportunity, he can get me saves. And that's kind of honestly the way I've constructed my team. Is Romano is the only true closer I have. But I'm trying to surround him with players who will get ancillary saves, players who are in leverage spots, who will contribute saves on occasion, and sort of in sum, give me an opportunity to have 2 closers a week, even though I have 1. Right. Because of the opportunity to roster 2 lockdown closers. By lockdown, I don't mean skills wise, I mean that's their job. There aren't enough of those pitchers to go around in a 16-team league. Right. And I made an effort to do that, but Blake Trinan, lost that opportunity, or was never going to have it because of the way they were going to use him. I took the opportunity when Jansen was a free agent to try to get Trinan to secure a second closer. But when that closed, I had to shift to a different approach. And like, how could I compete in saves? Right. And Duran was part of that. It was an effort to do that. I also wanted to lean into just knowing that middle relief. I think there's a shift as starts have gotten shorter, that there's more value to be had in middle relief. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to lean into that in my team. I wanted to have 2 to 3 guys that are middle relievers, mm-hmm. Who can contribute across multiple categories. So I don't know how much credulity that will have in the end. We'll see after the end of the year. Mm-hmm. It's the first year I've done that, but Duran is part of that.
So 2 things. The writer is Aaron Gleeman.
Thank you. Right. Right. I want to say Will Salmon, and that's he's the Brewers. Right. I don't know why I kept thinking Will Salmon. Thank you, though. The
other thing I was going to say is, so I've gone the opposite way, which is to try to roster as many like 6 and 7 inning starters as possible, because I understand that they're not real prevalent these days, right? We're going to see a lot of fantasy teams, especially in a 16-team league, are going to roster starters who go 4 and 5 innings. And so if I can roster starters who goes 6, 7, 8 innings, there's an advantage in doing that, right?
Yes.
It makes me nervous because there's so much injury risk in, I think anyone who throws 100 pitches at this point, we understand there's injury risk involved, right? But it's about like zagging when everyone is zigging. And mm-hmm. Yes. For me, I think the formula is to find, especially in a 16-team league, to find 4 starters who you can count on going 5, 6, 7 innings per game. And it like performing at a decent rate. We'll see what happens. I'm really nervous about the health of a lot of my starters. Robbie Ray, who we can talk about, was 2 to 3 miles an hour under what he was last year. The case could be made. He was pitching in Chicago. It was cold. He said so. There's a lot of pitchers who were saying the same thing, whose velocity was down. I don't know what to read from that. I want to trust him because I'm a Mariners fan, but we'll see. I don't know. Is it time to dig into the players who were surprised
Yeah, please.
by?
Yeah. I'm going to start with Seiya Suzuki. And I say that I think you and I have talked about him quite a bit on the pod,
Right.
you know, both from a curiosity and then also just an excitement standpoint
So he
of where
went
we
1-1, right?
Yes, he did.
Mhm.
But I think for me, you know, the surface stats are great, right? But I think all those two, both on the negative side and the positive side, those have to be taken with a grain of salt. But what reason I want to highlight Seiya was the underlying skills show like someone who's very comfortable in his approach, very comfortable with what he's seeing at the plate. He has, again, his X stats back up what he's doing on the surface. So that's all there. He's in the top 5 in home runs, average, OBP, slugging, and OPS in a National League. So, and again, all the X stats back that up. But what really interesting to me is he has a completely balanced spray chart. I know for me, I question, could he have all fields power? Is he going to be a dead pull hitter? He's showing that that's not the case.
Right.
His zone contact rate is 88.5%, which is upper echelon. Puts him in the top 40 so far this year, but if he held that rate, he'd be in the top 20 based on 2021 results.
Yep.
And he is number 5 in the MLB in chase rate. So he is not chasing. So, I mean, the play skills are just fantastic. And again, I would have expected, you know, I think when we talked about him, one of the things I said was, I trust the skills, how they'll translate, but you have to give him time to get his feet under him and acclimate to velocity, acclimate to just being in a different place. And so when I look at these underlying skills, just tells me he's very comfortable and he's going to maybe he's obviously transitioned much faster than I would have been now comfortable forecasting him to.
Right. He does need time.
So he's my surprise.
So he has 3 home runs, and his OPS is 1.395 right now. It's when you see players come over from Japan or Korea or really any other league outside of major leagues, you expect them to have to adjust to velocity and adjust to a breaking ball that has a different level of break than what they're used to. And it's super clear with his pitch recognition. It's super clear that he doesn't need that adjustment, right? It's like Ichiro. So when I think of players coming from Japan, I think of Ichiro and I think of Hideki Matsui as the two who really did make that adjustment quickly. And you thought of them as superstars immediately. And I think Suzuki is in that category, right? Where the fact that he recognizes pitches means that he's going to perform. I think I'm comfortable at this point. And I know we roster him in, I think in NFBC, not TGFBI, right?
Yeah, it's our draft and hold team.
Right. So I look at Suzuki, I see a 30 home run, like 280 hitter. And I don't know what he's going to do as far as running on the bases. I don't know what Chicago's offense is going to look like, but I see a 30 home run hitter who's going to hit for a decent average because of pitch recognition and his power, right? I'm super impressed by him. I think he's in that bucket of the super high performing players coming from the Japanese league. Like I said, Matsui, Ichiro. Are there any others like that are in that bucket? Because Kazuo Matsui was not good, right?
Right.
So to me, he's the third really high performing Japanese player or Japanese hitter, I guess. So I have a long list. The first one on my list is Owen Miller. What do we do with Owen Miller? He can run. He's hitting for power. Like, what do we do?
I mean, I don't know. You convinced me based on his underlying skills, what you think. I mean, I
don't know. He's got what, 2 home runs. He's playing first base, which is a position that doesn't accumulate steals. He hasn't stolen bags, but he has a I don't know what his savant number is for sprint speed, but I know it's high. I know the dude runs fast. What do we do with him? He
I don't
was
know, man. But if you gave me
he was
100
picked up on
guesses of who
Thursday.
your
What's
if
that?
you gave me 100 guesses of who your supplies player was going to be, I would not have come up with Owen Miller.
Why? Really?
I don't know.
That's funny. I
You've
love
been
it.
watching too many Guardians games. You just get off the Quan Kool-Aid.
I am on the Quan Kool-Aid. That is for sure. Dude, Owen Miller's 2002 MLB percentile rankings. You know what his sprint speed is at first base? Any idea?
99.
What is it?
99. I don't know.
No, it's 90.
90.
It starts with the 9.
It starts with the 9.
Like, and the dude plays first base. How do
I'm
you
gonna pull
not?
up roster resource and see where he's batting.
Doesn't matter at this point. So 74. So this again, super small sample size, 26 plate appearances, 74th percentile average exit, 69th percentile max exit, 81st percentile hard hit. Like X WOBA is 81st, XBA is 93rd, X slug is 85th, barrel is 59th, and sprint speed is 90th. Like, that's a good player. So far, that's a good player. Again, small sample size, but is there any regret in not trying to pick him up in Fantrax or TGFBI, NFBC? Well, not NFBC, because NFBC is draft and hold, but TGFBI or Fantrax.
He might be someone who's available for us in TGFBI. So maybe we should look at adding him in Fab this week. I wouldn't be surprised if he's available. I think for me and Fantrax, no, I don't have any worries right now. I wouldn't be necessarily worried about missing out on him. Future value in Fangraphs is 45. I don't know. Like Cleveland has so many of these same type of guys who have, a solid approach, who have above average hit tool, who are contact first and then light on power. I guess I just get kind of numb because they kind of blend together.
He's one who, if he continues to play as he is, he's going to get time over Bobby Bradley, right?
Right, as he should.
And I think that if we're talking about any kind of league where accumulating plate appearances is important, like you're talking about a poor man's Paul Goldschmidt. If he hits for a little bit of power and can steal a couple of bags, right? Like that's literally what we're talking. That's the skill set we're talking about at first base.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you've piqued my interest. I'll have to watch him more closely. So in our league, he was picked up on April 14th, which I think was 2 days ago, by the Cleveland
Patrick,
fan,
right? Last
by the Cleveland fan in our league, and he is playing him at second base, and he has ironically first base Paul Goldschmidt. So he has the player you just comped him to. That's very interesting.
And he hasn't had in AA for San Diego, he had 5 steals. In low A for San Diego, he had 4 steals in 2018. Nowhere in his minor league career has he really stolen bases. But I look at that sprint speed and I say, like, okay, there's potential for 5 to 10 steals. And if you can find a first baseman with 5 to 10 steals plus 20 home run power, which it looks like he has, I don't know. He's someone that has surprised me thus far.
Interesting. Well, I give you credit. I know I teased you about pulling on Miller, but I love that you talked about a Cleveland player who's not Quan, because that's pretty cool. Who is your surprise pitcher?
I won't say Logan Webb because we've had that conversation a million times.
I mean, I would think that you would expected what he's done, and you've not been surprised by it.
I did. I think Chris Bassett is my surprise, honestly.
Okay.
So Dylan Cease, I have on my list Dylan Cease, Carlos Rodon, Logan Webb, Logan Gilbert. My surprises would be Kyle Wright, Kyle Gibson, Jesus Luzardo and Tyler McGill. The one that's most interesting to me is probably Bassett. From what I understand about his approach to this year is he just came in like so determined to pitch well, right? He was so focused on being like just an amazing pitcher, and his determination and his willingness and focus on being a great pitcher is what made him great in these first couple of starts. And the skills were there to be good, not great, but I really admire what he's done. He's the kind of guy where if I would have read his bio and I would have learned more about him before drafts, I would have picked him because I like him.
Right.
Because he's nuts, right?
Sure.
He's got, there's a screw loose, which is what makes him a great pitcher. But
I'm trying to look it up on Savant, but if I'm not mistaken, he actually, one of the things we talked about with him in the preseason was he has 6 pitches, and I believe I heard that he had a 7th.
That's right.
So I'm trying to look it up to see on Savant and see what it is.
So far he's pitched 12 innings. He has struck out 14, given up 5 hits, 1 run, 3 walks. Like he's a bulldog out there, and he's absolutely determined to be a great pitcher. And he's out there throwing 92, 93. What did he top out at? Let me look at his velocity.
Pulling it up right now here. Where are the
92.1. So fastball at 92.1, slider at 75.8, cutter at 87.9, curveball 71.4, and changeup at 86.5. And he throws his fastball 43.5% and his cutter 26.7%. So really, he's fastball cutter with a little bit of junk in between.
Yeah. So I had him see his start yesterday. Cutter, sinker, 4-seam curve, change slider. So I'm only seeing 6 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
But he had over 25% whiff rate on 4 of them.
Right.
No.
I don't know.
He's a interesting player. And then I think I had him in my 3rd tier when we did SP rankings.
You did. I think I had him in my 4th.
Yeah. That's a great poll.
I think he's a
surprise pitcher.
So real quick, he's a good example of a player who, if you learn about who he is, like outside of the numbers, right? If you just learn about who he is and what he's been through to get to where he is, you're more likely to believe in his performance moving forward, right? And I wish that I would have researched Chris Bassett more as a person than I did, because I saw him as, like, in our 16-team league, I saw him as like an SP4. I was like, okay, Chris Bassett performed well in the A's, huge park. Let's see what he does in the National League. But I think I would have had a different opinion about him had I actually dug more into who the player is and what his focus looks like. He's badass. Like, I hope he wins a Cy Young at this point. I really like Chris Bassett a lot.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, you mentioned Kyle Gibson. So I just wanted to share with you, in preparation for the podcast, I pulled a couple of Savant reports. Top 10 pitchers in swings and misses so far. And this is not by percentages, by total swings and misses. So this could be swayed a little bit by who's had 2 starts. The top 10, your favorite pitcher, Kevin Gausman. Your second favorite pitcher, Carlos Rodon. Kyle Gibson was 3rd. I was shocked to see that. And I just want to share that.
Rodon is actually my favorite. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then number 4, Burns. And then Montas, Eovaldi, McClanahan, Cole, Cease at 9, and Pablo Lopez at 10. And then my favorite pitcher, Joe Ryan, 11. And your 3rd favorite pitcher, Logan Webb, at 12. But yeah, so it's interesting, just some early swing and miss. And it was interesting to see Kyle Gibson's name on that list.
I think of Kyle Gibson as a pitch to contact, like sinker slider guy. And clearly Philadelphia has changed I haven't looked at his pitch mix, but clearly they've changed something in his approach to get him to where he is right now.
Yeah.
He's a really different pitcher than he was previously.
So my surprise pitcher, a little bit farther down, not of the quality, was Michael Lorenzen. And the biggest thing that surprised me was the no walks. Um, his stuff plus coming out of the start, which he went 6 scoreless innings, was only 94.2, so below league average.
Mhm.
However, his command plus was 107.3. And if you're a fanboy of him like I have been, you know that the command has really been his undoing in the past. He has a very deep arsenal. His start the other day, he threw a 4-seam sinker, slider, cutter, and change. He has a 6 pitch that he's thrown, but he didn't throw it the other day. He has a very strong ground ball lean. Both in this start, he has 69% ground ball, and he's had that for much of his career, which has been to this point as a reliever. He was with Cincinnati. They used him in the bullpen. He also played the outfield a little bit. He's a really versatile athlete.
He's a better hitter than he's a pitcher, right?
There was potential, I think, early on, but he signed with LA, the Angels, specifically because they were going to give him the opportunity to be a starting pitcher.
Okay.
And I kind of like your regret on in a different way, but a regret on Bassett. I didn't buy into him because I trying to mitigate against my own bias of liking him and liking his pitch mix, liking him as a player. I roster Shohei Ohtani, the 2A guy, just versatile athletes, are guys that I'm drawn to. That they're kind of unicorns in the game. There's not too many guys that try to play both ways at that level. So I kind of, because I don't trust my own bias, I didn't take him. So to see him come out and have this start, see his command be so much better. He did lose a little bit of the velocity. Obviously, when you go from the bullpen to start, your velocity is going to tick down.
Right.
But, he used his pitches all more than 11% of the time. So it's a genuine 5-pitch mix. He's still touching 94, 95 on the 4-seam and 2-seams. He has good velocity. I love the ground ball lean. And he has, looking at the movement, he has great movement on his, if you watch him pitch, he gets a lot of movement. And that's one of the reasons why he gets the ball on the ground so much, as he misses barrel. So his 4-seam has plus horizontal movement. Sinker has plus vertical and horizontal movement. And these are all against league average. Right. His slider has plus vertical and plus horizontal movement. His cutter and change have neutral movement, but again, in the mix of everything. So again, I regret not taking a flyer on him, but I didn't, again, because I was worried that it's just my personal preference for him and wanting to see him succeed, right, that it would get in the way of my analysis of, hey, this is a guy that had over a 60 ERA last year that has command problems, and command is something I'm trying to prioritize on my roster.
So where do you put him, like in a 15-team league, like TGFBI or NFBC or our 16-team head-to-head? Where do you put Lorenzen? Like he's an SP 4, 5?
I think SP. I would rank him as like an SP 5 or 6 at this point. I wouldn't want to rely on him, every single time. I don't think he's matchup proof. I want to see more. This is just one start. Sure. But I just was really surprised again to see the command jump, and just watching him on the mound, he just seemed very much in command of himself and his pitches. And I was just really encouraged to see it, and he just really surprised me. And so that's why I wanted to highlight him here. Okay. And for clarity, I don't know if Ken has listened to the podcast. I've been bothering him the last 48 hours trying to acquire him. Nice. And I've been very upfront. I'm like, hey, man, I'm buying high here. He's had one good start, but I like this guy. I don't want to miss out. Is there any way that you would trade him to me? So, right. Ken, if you're out there, I still don't want him. He's an angel, which knocks him down about 3 pegs with me. It does. Let's be honest. It does. That team just invents new ways to come up short.
I can't.
Yeah.
But yes, the skill set is there for him to be a productive pitcher. I don't see much more than an SP5, but and that's what I need and want. So, but I'm completely aligned with you. But I agree with you about that. I don't think there's enough swing and miss to push up more than that. I honestly like him better as an 8th inning like holds guy in our league that values that where holds is a category. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Before we move on, I think we have to talk a little bit about Jesus Luzardo. There's a lot of debate in the community right now as to whether Luzardo is for real or not. I know Matt traded for him, values him very highly. He's throwing 98, spotting his fastball. A lot of question about his ability to locate his off-speed stuff. But he had 12 strikeouts in a 5-inning appearance in his first start. What do you see with Luzardo moving forward?
I want to see more. I think there were some issues with the sun in that game that might have contributed a little bit to the strikeout total.
Mhm.
And I would push back on someone overrating that. I do think obviously his talent he has the raw tools and just hasn't been able to put it together and hasn't been consistent. So I would not overpay. Certainly, I think if you were an ability like to roster him and maybe if he has a good matchup and you feel good about starting him next time, but I wouldn't say like, all right, he's locked in. He's found it now. I'd want to see more just because for me, he's had this before where he's had good starts. He flashes it. He's just not able to hold it. His stuff plus was 104.2, which is good. It's over league average. And his command was still location plus was 96. So it was still below league average. So command has been something that's been a challenge for him. I know he changed his pitch mix. I don't have that pulled up. I wasn't prepared. I can dig it out maybe for next time. I'll look and see like how he changed his mix, but I know that he did change it a little bit.
I think
But his
he
shapes,
changed his shape a little bit too.
Yeah.
I think that's the bigger impact
Yeah.
for him is changing shape.
Yeah.
If you got 98 from the left side and you change shape a little bit in a positive manner, I can see that being pretty impactful. For me, he's still like you. I want to see 5 starts, right? I want to see.
Yeah, I
I
want
think
to see
that's
him
the common
string it
theme.
together.
For me, that's a common theme with any of these guys is I want to see, and I think it's why I've kind of held on my rosters in various leagues, is I want to see like the next, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. I haven't even started building databases to track a lot of the metrics and a lot of the performance of the players on my teams, because we just don't know, right? It's the sample size is too small. I do like Luzardo. I like his velocity. I think he performed really well in the first start. It's somebody we have to talk about because he had 12 strikeouts in 5 innings.
Yeah. And from a dynasty perspective, I think it's a smart play on Matt's part because
Absolutely.
when you're trying to build, I mean, he's obviously been in the majors for 3 years, but he's still young enough where he could be if he finds it, he could be a number 2 or 3 starter for the next 3 or 4 years. And
Absolutely.
even if you're rebuilding, you can't rebuild around all prospects. So
right. He's for what he's costing right now in various leagues. I'll let somebody else take that risk.
Yeah.
But we can talk about him in a month, and we might be talking about in a 15-team league like an SP3.
Yeah.
Right, because he might be striking out 11, 12 guys per 9. He's got that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But he was somebody who had to be brought up.
Cool. I need to wrap so I can get going to work. Do you want to talk about waiver thoughts real quick before we wrap up?
Sure. I don't have a ton as far as waivers go. I think Merrill Kelly is interesting. And I think Tyler McGill is interesting. More in that, I just wonder, like, what do you think about guys who pop with extra like 2 or 3 miles an hour in velocity and come out striking people out? And do you draft based on do you draft so that you have the ability to pick up guys like that in the first couple of weeks? For me, I don't. Like, I don't really think about, can I cut this guy? Is this a guy that I want to, that's kind of fungible?
Yeah.
And both Kelly and McGill are not players that were attractive to me, but I understand that both of them can potentially be like SP2, SP3 kind of range in our leagues, and that there's value in them. They're just, I'm not the kind of player that tends to invest in those kind of guys.
Yeah, I mean, other pitchers I wrote down that I thought were interesting that have been picked up, Odorizzi, Chris Paddock, you mentioned Merrill Kelly. We talked about Michael Lorenzen as my player I highlighted. He was picked up prior to his start. Josh Fleming for Tampa, who's both started and piggybacked so far. Carlos Hernandez has been off to a terrible start and had a terrible spring. Tyler Anderson, who I picked up as a follower. Tyler Wells, starting pitcher for Baltimore, I picked up. And Chris Archer was picked up today, who's in the rotation for Minnesota.
Right.
I don't necessarily have anything to add on Kelly or McGill. McGill, I have a little bit of sourness towards because he was a player that I had found some interesting things from a skills perspective, but he had extreme platoon splits and also command issues last year. And then looking at, but I was interested in him. Could he take a step forward? And I followed him in spring, and he had 7 strikeouts and 5 walks. So I kind of eliminated him based on like, hey, the command issues are still there.
Right.
I looked at the left-handed, being in the NL East and some of the left-handed power in that division. I was like, I don't trust him. And so to see him come out,
Schwarber.
Yep, exactly.
Harper,
So
on and on, for sure.
and I'm not saying he's necessarily past those, but he clearly so far has been fantastic. So I have a little bit of FOMO there as someone who was on my list, but I tracked in spring and then I didn't pursue. I know I presented that we draft him a couple of times in some of our deeper parts of our drafts. We didn't end up doing it, and he's gone in our league now, and he's obviously being valued very highly.
Right.
So yeah, not to talk about myself, but like Tyler Wells is a player who had a 129 stuff plus, but got knocked around by the Rays. I picked him up as a speculative ad because they need guys who pitch, and he pitched out of the bullpen last year, had a very good stuff plus and also very good command. And so when I saw that stuff plus number, I just grabbed him.
So was the 129 based on relief or starting?
It was based on starting. It was for this year.
Sure. Okay.
So I'm actually following him right now. He's through 3 scoreless. And he's given up 2 hard hit balls, but has also pitched out of some trouble. The Yankees, as usual, are working some walks against him. He has walked more guys than I expected based on his command, but he's probably just adjusting to the role. So I don't know. I love stuff like that, trying to find guys like that. But interesting bats have been picked up. Tellez, Dom Smith, Luis Ariz. You picked up Brad Miller, Michael Brantley, Luke Voigt has been dropped and picked up multiple times. Kind of like corner power bats. Ariz is a hit tool guy. We had Alec Baum was dropped, and Grisham was dropped. Toro was dropped. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. Sano was dropped. That's kind of a surprise to me. I know shade against any owners who dropped those guys. I'm not saying they were bad drops. It's just interesting to see guys like that get churned early on. But I think it is smart to kind of have a couple guys at the end of your roster, depending on the compositions that you're willing to move on from and go after someone else and try to find someone who's potentially going to spike a good season. So.
Right.
And then we had a couple of pitchers picked up, I think, that are really interesting. Bobby Miller was picked up. Cody Morris, I picked up. Brandon picked up Spencer Strider, who's already returning on that. And then you picked up Sasaki after his perfect game as a long-term play, which I think is super fascinating as well. So just some interesting pitching prospects that have been put on rosters.
Right.
So it's been a lot of churn. Obviously, we had 4 days before the season started where we could pick up players and it didn't come off of our season allotment. So there was just a lot of movement post-draft, a lot of guys grabbing people who were on the IL once they were designated by their MLB team and stashing those guys for later. So yeah, it was a very active period. I think to me, the pitching prospects and then the pitchers are probably the things that are more interesting at this point.
I agree. I think that the Chris Paddocks of the world are not as interesting to me as some of the more higher upside plays. And then there's a lot of, it's league specific, but there's a lot of roster flexibility stuff going on too right now. That's interesting as far as who's being picked up and who's not. But I don't think I think we covered the glaring players who were not drafted kind of in a lot of leagues like Amaro Kelly or Tyler McGill that needed to be picked up, or a Stephen Kwan or an Owen Miller, those kinds of players. It's been fun. And I hope that people are watching baseball. I hope that people are engaged because it's been a really, really great first week or so. A lot of really interesting players. I'd like to add that Josh Bell, his launch angle is up to 10.7 degrees, and that's why he's performing at the rate that he is. Also, Andrew Vaughn is hitting right-handers, kind of like we've talked about. There's a couple of players that I've been rooting for, whether they're on my teams or not, just to succeed, because I feel like it's like simple tweaks to
Yeah.
get them to where they need to be. One of the questions we can talk about next time is a player like Miles Straw has 4 steals already. What's the value of having a player like him that doesn't provide anything other than potentially runs and steals? I'm shocked by Joey Bart having 2 home runs and actually being a productive offensive player. Brian Hayes has a 967 OPS for you, even though he's got a negative launch angle currently. But he's a really fun player. He's one of those players that I like have an emotional attachment to. And so even if he's not super like a superstar, I would love having him on my team. I really like him a lot. And then one other thing, us picking Francisco Lindor in the 3rd round was the NFBC, is that right?
Yes.
TGFBI.
TGFBI.
Has proven to
Yep.
be a pretty decent selection so far, with 3 home runs and 2 steals and an OPS of 1.069.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. He seems much more comfortable. He had a home run from both sides yesterday,
Yeah,
2 days ago, which is just incredible. So
he looks like the Francisco Lindor of his prime in Cleveland.
Yep.
But yeah, super excited. I'm really proud of our drafts in both of the expert leagues. We're currently 2nd in our TGFBI league, and I think in the top 20 or 25 overall in TGFBI after the first week or so. So maybe you and I together know what we're talking about a little bit. Who knows?
Who knows? All right, man. I got to
Good to
run.
see you,
We'll talk
brother.
more about TGFBI next episode.
For sure.
Have a good night.
We'll see you Tuesday.
All right. Peace out. Bye,
Bye,
guys.
brother.